have to explain the tokens to them, you have to explain the plugin to them, and it's probably easier to just use the built-in functionalities. We went through quite a major accessibility audit or rewrite because everything from the start wasn't done with accessibility in mind. We have basically every component built with subcomponents. With the use of the design documentation, put together a new card or a new variant they use then on the product. I think a lot of people think that design systems stifle creativity. So
Hello, Valentin. Welcome to the Design System Masters podcast. Before starting this episode, I would like to share a funny coincidence because I started with meetups in Slovenia 3 years ago. And on the first meetup was actually your colleague explaining how you do design systems at Better. And in that time, everything was kind of at the starting point. And there is also a cool story how you did the video for the buy-in. Maybe you can start with explaining what Better is and what you're doing, and then we can proceed.
thank you for invite. Firstly, so as Romina said, I work at Better. We are healthcare IT company. I think there are around 150 employees, and we have a design system which evolved from the video Romina mentioned quite a lot. So we have 3 product teams using the design system, and around 7 designers basically on the product teams using it. We are centralized design system team. I'm leading the team. I have one designer with me. I'm still doing a lot of operational things, so I count myself a designer too. So 2 designers and 1 developer. And I think there are around 20 or 25 front-end developers using the components we produced every day. So yeah, that's stories. I think I joined around 3 years ago. I joined Better as a UI designer, mostly working on UI components because we were just doing the scoping of everything. I think the video showed quite a lot of things are done, but it wasn't at the time. It was like stakeholders buy-in video, and it was really important. So kudos to Samu, Achko, and Ida Builds that produced it. It was a really important one, and I think we still show it around every day because it was very influential.
Yeah, so that video was actually showing the ideal state of the design system, right? So they produced all the components and how it would look like if everything would be built.
Yeah, that's right. And at the time I joined, I think we were just in the some kind of period that we were basically putting everything together based on the framework we choose, because everything shown in the video was kind of very conceptual, very perfect like, and then we kind of choose which framework we want to go with to produce the design system, and then we started to like systemize everything, tokenize everything, all the good stuff of design systems basically.
But before continuing, what is Better? I mean, you are in healthcare industry, but maybe share a little bit more what you're doing and why it's also important to know that healthcare industry has a lot of other privacy issues that you have to be careful when you're doing all the components and testing.
Yeah. So yeah, Better is basically doing software for clinical facing applications mostly. So we are doing applications from portals, so clinician facing portals where all the patient data is gathered and shown. And then we have some patient facing apps, which are like prompts that patients can basically edit their own data. Patients can answer the questionnaires and everything. So we have basically 2 sides that are patients, and then we have clinicians. And then a couple of years ago, we started with tooling too. So we have tooling side, which is more like citizen developer based. So tooling side is basically producing forms, producing views in low-code building modes. So we need to have design system that basically supports all the 3 branches, from patient-facing, which is very accessibility guided. So we need to have accessibility standards like VCAG 2.2. Basically, we are aiming for the AA. And then we have tooling, which is more, we want everything compact. We want as much information on the screen as possible. We want everything dense. And then we have something in between, which was also the initial idea, the clinician. This is basically the base of our design system, is the clinician facing applications. These are mostly like portals, basically viewers of documents, viewers of patient data or clinician data. So it's basically branch into three directions with teaming right now.
So actually clients come to you and they can choose what kind of data they want to show, and then you suggest based on their wishes which components are the best for this.
Oh yeah, basically we have it more on a product base. So if the client comes in and buys a portal which is clinical based, they will get the clinical based theme. And if they want to buy if they come in and they buy how they call a bundle, then you have like maybe studio tools, which is where clinicians or developers can put together forms and they can use it later in portals. So it's basically all connected, basically the same components, but just themed differently.
But are they allowed to do any customization based on their branding?
Right now, not yet. We are building onto it. I think later on, when we will add more customizability to the tooling, I think we will open up some of the basic things like primary colors, like branding, maybe some border radius, things that they are not overriding any interactability or accessibility.
So you mentioned that, of course, first you started with this video that was very visual, everything looked perfect. But what was the process later on? I mean, how did you come up with design tokens? Because this is always the most challenging part, I feel. How did you tackle all these workshops with other stakeholders?
Yeah. Uh, it was basically, as we saw, we had a concept on the video. So we had all the components that we visualize how we want them to look. And then on the other hand, we had like which framework would be good to go with. So at that moment, we choose Angular material as our base. So our components were based on Angular material firstly. So Angular had its own, I should say, problems or not problems, but yeah, constraints. And material also had their own tokens, basically kind of setup. Not the best token setup with M2. I think they bring out better tokens with M3, but yeah, it was kind of a lot of work, a lot of one-on-ones with developers, how they see tokens, how we see tokens. And firstly, we did only one team, so it was basically on clinicians' side. So we did a BDS or better design system for clinicians. So that was our first team. We did quite a lot of token sessions. We kind of went with approaches that everyone took. So we did firstly how we'll do categories, how we will core tokens, how we will have semantic tokens, and then component tokens, and then we basically did some kind of automations. So from Figma to later on code, it's also translated via style dictionary. So there is not a lot of manual work.
So what do you mean by automation?
So we also have all design tokens are in Figma. So we have component tokens, and everything is then translated and put into right folders via style dictionary. So we don't have to manually put files or CSS variables everywhere. So it's all basically done for us.
But then you're using Token Studio or native Figma variables.
Right now, it's a mixture of both. So we have Figma variables, which are for the designers. And then we have a clear copy in the Token Studio because it's easier to export and easier to maintain. So it's all connected. It's not the perfect probably solution. And I think we'll have to look into it more because Figma is kind of restraining with all the APIs and everything.
I mean, yeah, I think most of the teams actually combine both. So native Figma and then Token Studio if they don't have the API or other options or actually something custom.
Yeah, and it's easier because explaining another additional plugin to the designers, because we have 7 designers working in the product teams, and then you have to explain the tokens to them, you have to explain the plugin to them, and it's probably easier to just use the built-in functionalities.
Yeah, probably it's also easier because you don't want them to touch anything in this any structure.
Yeah.
So, but they still probably know about design tokens and what's the meaning behind.
Yeah, we had some workshops with them, definitely explaining all the taxonomy, all everything. So they basically know what they are, but we kind of push the components usage a lot. So we don't have a lot of like styles being attached. Maybe text, maybe some background styles, which are quite easy to remember because the taxonomy is really easy. So naming is very easy, but I think that's all they mostly use.
But did the naming structure, so taxonomy, changed from when you started and tested? Because you mentioned that you only did one team for clinicians first, or you're still using the same structure and you actually saw after all the workshops that this is a cool approach and you stick with it.
Yeah, basically, we did it right at the first time. That was kind of amazing. Still proud of us because right now, when we did the teams, everything fell in together. But we have some kind of translators too, because as we know, when tokens have all the same names and everything, the style dictionary kind of don't want to translate the tokens for you. So we have to add some kind of layers and then delete it after in the style dictionary naming. So we when we get the output, we have like clinician light, clinician dark, and then we have like tooling light, tooling dark, and tokens in the files are all the same. So the components have just one variable connected to the background.
Nice. Oh, so you just did the teams. You didn't have the first. You had just one team, and now through all these years you realized what works and what doesn't, and now you implement it for both. I mean, for
Yeah,
all three.
Yeah, the teaming was basically mostly done last year because we went through quite a major accessibility audit or rewrite because everything from the start wasn't done with accessibility in mind. Mostly like input fields, input borders, which are quite strict when you look at the VCAG 2.2 AA standard. And so we had to like push palettes around. We have to remap everything with new colors. So when we did that, it was also a perfect opportunity to do teaming too.
So what was the process like? I mean, how did you tackle? Did you go went like component by component, or did you changed everything and then released?
Yeah, we basically made a gap analysis with both product teams that we saw that we need teaming for. So on the tooling part, we went through their application because they don't use BDS everywhere, not yet. I hope it will be soon adopted to the higher level. But we went through all the like competitors. We went through the things that we saw online to see what are the like basic sizes, what are the perfect sizes for the toolings, like button sizes, text sizes, because it's different than clinical applications. So we basically made a gap analysis, and then we saw which are the basic gaps between our current tokens and the team we want to achieve. And then we just went to all into our files and try to just duplicate the team and play with it. So we came to the solutions. And it was the same on the other side because we know that accessibility and patient facing has quite a lot of other problems like inputs needs to be much bigger, touch spots needs to be at least 40 pixels on width and everything else. So we went on the bigger side. So everything was then converted with some mathematics and scaling up and down.
And you use that token studio for this kind of calculation. So did you test this in Figma? Or this also means that you created components in code and you played with them.
Yeah, we can go one step before. So, as you said before, we went through tokenization much earlier, before the tokens. So when we had tokens and then we went with Angular material components, we basically in, I don't know, probably year and a half released like 40 components with Angular material. These are like base building blocks for UI elements or UI screens, and then we had some special ones for clinicians, which we can take later too, because healthcare design systems are a bit different than other design systems because of the small components we have that are specifically made for the clinicians. But we went with Angular material, and then it was basically like we kind of got to some kind of chokeholds or how do I call that? We went to the dead end with an Angular material, with the limitations of everything, with how bloated the Angular material is. Then we had some problems, like one or two product teams were behind on Angular versions, other was way above with Angular versions. So we kind of stuck dead end with the Angular material components because we couldn't handle it anymore. So that is where we basically got to the point that we need web components. So we basically we are basically right now in some step of rewriting all of our components. And now when we are rewriting all of our components, we are also testing all the theming and all the accessibility parts. So I must say that all the components that are used right now don't support theming yet, and are not the most accessible. They are accessible to one point, but not like we want them to. So we are still in some kind of transitional period. We are just now developing web components that will also have all the theming and accessibility.
And I suspect that it's really strict in healthcare systems when you have to test these components. How does this go? I mean, probably you have some kind of scenarios that you test with the clients, or what's the process like after creating all these web components?
Yeah, it's basically we do a lot of testing on our own. So every components have test cases. We try to push them to see if anything breaks. But the major testing are done by our product teams mostly, because our primary users are product team designers and product team developers, and they mostly kind of test components for us. So they go to user groups, they have A/B testings, they have everything that product needs to have. And most of the hardcore testing is done by either the implementing side. So we do our product testing ourselves, and then when our product is ready to be shipped, it's a long process between us and the one that is buying the product or using the product. We go through kind of a long period of testing. So it's mostly more on product base, on higher base, but everything is tested there.
So they actually give you feedback, and then based on that feedback, you prioritize and you change the component if necessary.
Yeah, yeah. We do quite a lot on one-on-one work with our product designers. They are great. They're also one of the best promoters of design system in product teams, and it's really amazing because we sit a lot together. They give us feedback. They also, last year we started with the SUS questionnaire, the system usability score questionnaire, with the designers and developers. So we have some kind of a percentage based opinion on how we do the design system, and I think we graded quite well. But it will show through years, because it's now we set the base, and I think our grade will go up through the years with the design system. But yeah, it's important to sit with designers. It's important to have meetings. It's important to have like show and tells when we can see how our components are used, where the components are misused, and then we can help them use them better.
So I totally agree. And you mentioned that you actually have three people in your design system team. So it's you, another designer, and another developer. But how do you share your progress, or how do you collaborate with others? I mean, web components and the progress here is one thing, but how can they ask for a new component, or how do you inform them what happened in this week or this month?
Yeah, we do have like office hours. That's the first thing. We have office hours every week. They can come with to us. They can ask us everything. They can ask for the improvements, and then we have on ClickUp, which we use for the organization. We have forms that they can submit bugs. They can submit new features. They can submit anything they want regarding the design system. And we do quite a lot of workshops with project teams, with product managers. So we see where the products are going, and then we try to put everything together and prioritize based on which team or product needs the component, or which product needs new additional additional functionality added to the components. So it's basically gathering as much feedback from designers, from developers, from product managers, basically seeing their roadmap, where they're headed and which functionalities are added to the products. So we kind of get all the things we need to push out. So I think us as designers are basically involved in a lot of discoveries too. So product designers do a lot of discoveries, and with they sit with analytics, and they kind of come to us. Yeah, there is a big product or there is a big functionality coming, and we will need some of the components added to the design system. But we don't add everything because it would be just too much, and it's sometimes it's very product specific components, and we just provide the tokens, we just provide the styling, and we provide the help on how to build a component, so they have their own components too.
Are there any tools that you would recommend for gathering the feedback or prioritization or anything that could help our listeners?
Yeah, we basically use ClickUp on company-wide base, and I kind of like it because we have contact forums regarding the bugs. We have contact forum regarding the new feature requests. So when the bugs come in, we can just put them to the task list, and we can put the priority on. And it's good because when somebody submits a bug, they stay on the task, so they see what is going on with the task. They see if it's been fixed, and when we release, we can also add all the tasks done into the release and then mention it in the release note, so what was fixed. So we have the trackage here, and it's a great tool. I think ClickUp is basically a mesh of Trello, some old system. It's more modern. It looks good, which is quite kind of important for designers, I think. But it's usable. It's very usable.
But inside your team, you're communicating just on ClickUp, or you use Slack or something else?
Yeah, we use Teams at our company, and we have our own design system channel with where we push out internal promotions. So we do quite a lot of weekly posts regarding the components, how they are used, or like small facts about the components, and then we do a big release for the releases. So we do direct mail to the users, so to the designers and to the front-end developers, and then we also push it to the teams. So teams are basically our like internal communication channel, and then the design team also has its own team, which is more one-on-one, so we can ask questions and everything. So we are grouped together with designers from the product teams, and they can ask us anything.
Are there any recommendations, for example, when you update the component in Figma? What's the process there? So, for example, you are using one style and you update the design token, or you just change the whole component. What would be your advice for updating it?
Yeah, from our side, from the design system team, we use quite a lot of branching, so we don't break anything that we don't want to break, because in Figma, I think you quickly move something or change one little thing and it goes through or propagates through quite a lot of components, and you don't want that. So with branching, you have that ability to see that if you really didn't change anything else that you want to change. So firstly, yeah, branching from the part that someone is doing the change, and then we try to have really good written fixes, what was fixed or what was deprecated. We do deprecate components from time to time. We tend try to not to, but it happens because you change the structure of the components, and then maybe the text property won't update, and designers will be mad on the next release. But we did do a completely new library for this big update because it was so many changes based on looks, based on functionality. So with web components, we'll be pushing out a new Figma library.
Do you also use documentation outside of Figma, or Figma is your primary source for designers to learn about components?
Yeah, we tried to use Storybook as one source of truth for designers too, but we had our own problems with Storybook before because it wasn't showing the variants of the components that we wanted to show, like when you have some state and then you want to describe the certain state of the components. So we did quite a lot of statical images. So we did like documentation in Figma, we did images in Figma and then exported to Storybook, but that became quite a burden through the time. So we kind of put everything into the Figma. So Figma has now we have a big document which is BDS documentation or design documentation, and we have every components there connected to the library directly. So when we update the library, everything is pushed to the documentation too.
But on the other side, for developers, what are they using for documentation?
Yeah, documentation for the developers is done strictly on Storybook. So when new component is pushed out to the Storybook, we add all the usage guides, all the code guides, all the properties and everything on the Storybook. And they use, I think, GitLab for the main framework or the main Git library, and that's mostly it. Probably Storybook, and we want to have everything on Storybook again, but we will see if we will get to that.
Yeah, probably it's hard for designers to go outside of their native if it's not always there. If you're used to having everything in Figma and then some parts are there, probably that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I think we did a small research based on that. Like we talked with our designers how well they know our documentation, and when we had it on Storybook a lot, there was a lot of times, yeah, it's Storybook, we don't use it, we don't see the documentation being pushed out. So we basically just said, no, we will go to Figma, and everything will be connected, everything will be in Figma. So now they don't have any discourages not to use the documentation. I think even based on feedback, I think that designers are using documentation a lot more because we don't get so many personal questions anymore or one-on-one questions anymore. So I think it was a good move.
So, are there any other rituals or tricks or tips that you would say that are important when you're collaborating between designers, developers, and also Q&A and user testing in your case?
Yeah, between designers, I think, like I mentioned before, design show and tells are, I think, the most crucial for the design team to understand if designers are using products or they are using the product, which is a design system, right. So when we have design show and tells, we can see if the components are misused. We can see if they didn't use our components, and we can ask them why that's not the case. And of course, we have design reviews too. So we still gather together as a whole design team so we can help each other, use the components. And we have a small thing which we call BDS pre-implementation review. If we are pushing out really big product or a big feature in the product, we set up one-on-one or one-on-two meeting with the product designer and their front-end developer. So we go through if the components are used right, if the variants were added right, if the tokens are basically connected correctly, so we don't have then later on the problems with that.
Do you force everyone to use just components? Or what's the process when they're creating, let's say, a user flow or new screens for the product? How much flexibility is there, or how much do you allow it to be?
Yeah, I think we not to force them, we try to encourage them to use as much components as possible. So we also, as designers that we are putting together the library, we want the library to be as usable as possible. So we have basically every component built with subcomponents. So when things are like one great example is cart. In the cart you can have basically almost any component of the design system. But Figma right now, with its functionality or from the base functionality, you can add slots, but they don't cover all the cases. So we have like a subcomponent like headers of the card, the footers of the card, so they can basically, with the use of the design documentation, put together a new card or a new variant they use then on the product. So we are not strict that everything needs to be attached, everything needs to be connected, but we are strict with like token use. So when the textiles needs to be connected, spacers we want to have to connected, because we have quite a lot of picky front-end developers that they come back calling, why is there a spacer which is not connected to the token? And I quite like it because it shows that they're using the tokens very much.
But what do you see a difference? I mean, do you have all the components done as components in Figma, or do you also use patterns? So, for example, if you were saying that you have a cart and the cart can have a header, footer, and of course some body stuff content, and do you allow, I mean, of course, then you have restrictions what you can put in the header or the footer. Or would you rather say you can build the cart from other components, but you have to use this kind of container, this kind of border design token? You know what I mean? Where's the thin line between pattern and the component?
Yeah, I mean, it's more for me, where is the line between the like base components and then composites? Like, I think the card can be a component, but can be a composite too. So that is why I said before we have like the components that are on higher basis, like cards, maybe modal dialogues, popovers, the things at least that the things that can be modified. We have basically built with smaller parts, and then we have component as well too. So if someone is using a card and he will just change the text, he can use the component. But if someone is building something new, he can pick up the small pieces and put it together. And then we have quite good documentation on every single component and also composite. So we have our design documentation, which is for every single component, and then we have UX patterns too. So, but we say that UX patterns are mostly on, I think, even a bigger basis. So, like bulk editing a table or bulk editing in general is one big pattern, which can be done with cards, lists, maybe even, I don't know, settings or something. So we have UX patterns on maybe a little bit higher basis. So like opening a modal dialog, opening a popover, search, filtering. We have the patterns basically on higher basis, but with usage of the components that we have.
Yeah, and there's also separate guidelines then. I mean, it's different than just a composite component. So if you turn around now, what would you say that was your biggest mistake or something that you would change if you knew before? Is there a situation or something?
I think the we always make mistakes somewhere. So I think I mentioned it even before. I think it was going with Angular material as our first iteration of BDS. because I mean we did our research. We looked at every single work or framework. We looked at what we can use, and we were basically put with the fact, yeah, we have here at company we use Angular, so it needs to be something for Angular. So it kind of shrinks down your options. And then we looked at the other frameworks, and I think Material was the closest thing we needed. But then we went with it, so we did quite a lot of components with it, and then we started to get frustrations from the product teams which couldn't use our components because they were on higher or lower version than we were. And it was too slow too, because Angular material is very bloated with all of the dependencies, all of the connections. But I think it was not a mistake at that time, because we did everything that we could, and we were kind of in some kind of not being pressed on, but really needed to have a output, because for the company the output is mostly code, not designs. So designs can be done quickly, but the designs don't actually make the application. They're just the sketch or the wireframe for the application. But we needed the working code, so that was the at the time the best possible choice to get out. I think around 40 components, which is another small library. But with the time it got bloated. With the time it got confusing and hard to maintain. So yeah, that was then a hard stop, and we said we will just keep it for the use internally for the one product team that is using it the most, and we will start to develop new components which will also have Angular wrappers for the teams that are using Angular. So it will be hopefully a painless switch.
I mean, it's also in the start, probably if you would think about web components, it would even feel like a huge challenge, a longer a longer one that would need more resources. So maybe that was also one of the.
Yeah, definitely. And now when we have, like, at first we didn't also have all the functionalities, or we didn't have all the design documentation written down. Now we have everything written down from the things we did before. So we developed components. Okay, there were some compromises done using the Angular material, maybe on functionality too, but we did put everything down into the documentation. So now when we are developing web components, it goes much faster, because we have every edge case written down, we have every possible failure written down, so it goes much faster.
Yeah, exactly. Is there a tool? I mean, are you tracking your design system, or how do you know that you already mentioned some stuff that you know that it's getting better? Also, feedback from other people, but are you also do you have some metrics in place?
Yeah, mentioned before the SAS questionnaire, that is basically our metric for the how good is the design system, or how usable is the design system. So next thing is collecting as much feedback as we can, and workshops are a great feedback collector too. But yeah, next goal is definitely try to measure the adaptation through the code. Right now, we are doing mostly through Figma statistics, so we see how much of the files that have the handover tag or have the handover in name are using our attached styles and components. That's the thing that we can measure the adaptation to, but the code is not there yet. So we need to put that. It's one of the priorities, because it's a good talking point to the stakeholders to see how much of our components are actually used in code.
Do you still need to prepare some kind of reports for stakeholders for getting the buy-in of the design system?
Yeah, the initial buy-in was done really good with, like I said before, Ida, builds, and Samachko were amazing at it. And I need to thank Tomasz Gornik, which is our boss. He's really a great stakeholder. He's really understanding why we need a design system, but we still have some challenges in our way. So we still have to have presentations for the stakeholder or the middle management. We still have to provide that we are doing the right things. We still have to talk about our choices. And I think it's a part of it. So you go to the meeting with stakeholders, you present, you get their feedback, your view, their view on the design system. So I think it's ongoing every time. I don't think there is a design system which is approved and then it stays like that.
Yeah, probably it would stay, it would just be there, existing, and nobody would touch it.
Yeah,
But it's also a cool way of getting their feedback from the business side of the product.
yeah, and because its better design system is currently only internal, we don't have like some business metrics. But if we'll have a design system that will be able to push it to our partners or our clients, then we'll probably have to have some metrics on the business part too.
What's your take on AI and automations, and what do you think design system will look like in 1 year or 2 years? Because everything's changing so fast.
Yeah, I'm all for AI because it's a tool that can help you, that can boost your productivity. We use quite a lot of AI to help us with presentations, to help us with design documentation, that help us with like do and don'ts or content examples. We also tried quite several UI generation AIs, but they're not there yet. In my opinion, the Galileo is probably the best, or the Figma's beta one, but it's not pushed out yet. And I think it will be a good one if you can use your design system as a base. So the base that the AI can learn on, I think it will be a great one addition to like generate many ideas or generate some boilerplate templates from it. And then we did some research on how to like basically get from design to code faster. We did a blog on it. We tested, I think it's Builder.io, which converts from Figma designs to the code. And it's really great because it takes all the token. It's very precise on the spacing, is precise on the small CSS things that developers don't like to do. So we are using it even to build the web components or the boilerplate for them, and it's really a booster. And about AI, other things, we did quite a lot of or extensive research on UX AI patterns or even UI patterns of the AI. So we will be adding all these patterns to the BDS documentation too. So I think we have right now in our products two AI features, if I'm not wrong. So we have one which is chat-like assistant. So it's basically for generating AQL code. I'm not going into it because I'm not a technical or a medical person, but it's basically a AI assistant. And then on the other hand, we have on the product which is for prescribing medications. We have like one-click overview of a patient's health. So you just click it and you get a summary which things were prescribed, which things were changed. Maybe if the vital signs of the patient change, it will be shown there. So I think medical field will be different with AI, but they're kind of still quite scared of it because of all the personal information, because of all the decision making. It's not there yet, and I think it will need quite a lot of improvements to be used daily in the hospitals.
Yeah, it can be quite scary if something goes wrong
Yeah, it's
in terms of
and
privacy of the person.
yeah, in the medical field, you also need a lot of certification and everything, which is kind of hard to get with AI.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. I mean, you mentioned Builder.io, but how does it know which tokens are you using?
Oh yeah, it basically probably integrates somehow with the tokens that are used in the design system, the design file of the Figma. So you basically take the design you prepared in Figma. If everything is connected, you push it through the plugin to their builder. It basically takes all the information from Figma. So you need to have firstly a good design prepared in Figma, everything connected to the library, and then it does the job for you. It's basically much improved dev mode in Figma.
Mm-hmm. Now I understand. I thought it's like separate from Figma, but if it lives inside.
It's a Figma plugin.
Okay, okay, and then it's understood. So, what's one thing you wish more people would understand about design systems, or when they're starting with design systems?
Yeah, I don't think that. I think a lot of people think that design systems stifle creativity, so that there are you cannot be creative with design system is a thing that I heard quite a lot of times, but it's not right. So if designers use them as tools rather than restrictions, they can produce a lot of things. And I think that the great example is material design, because it's a library of components, and then you have like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 different products inside of Google, which are all using the same components, but every single app, maybe it's coherent or consistent, but it's so many different features or patterns that can be done from the design system. And one that I think we touched before with design not getting, or design system not getting, or getting stale, is I think that design system doesn't live without development. So UI kit is not a design system yet. It can be if it's developed and if it has support, but you cannot have a design system without developers.
I totally agree. I mean, it's code what we see, not the, the Figma files. What would be your advice for anyone that's just starting in design systems? It can be a junior designer or someone that would like to transition to design systems, because your career, I would say that it's skyrocketed, but you're also an eager learner and you learned so much in these past 3 years. So, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started as front end developer at the first. So basically, my dad is a developer, and I was basically pushed into the development from a young age. And I think that having like basic knowledge of development, basic knowledge of computer science, or how everything works, it really helps with the structures of design system. I think that is one of the best things. Like if I knew someone like just going to the middle school, I would say go to computer school. You will learn a lot. You will also suffer because of all the coding and all the strict teachers, all the mathematics and everything, but it's a really good base for the designer to have like a computer technician school, because I think I was in third year of the computer technician school where I basically started to think that maybe I won't be a developer because I like design more. And then I started to like shift into design, and I knew quite early that I want to do UI design. And then when I came like in contact with design system, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, because I'm not maybe the most creative person, because I was always like, when you do code, you're very like organized, you're very put in some kind of limitations. And then when I wanted to do creativity work or like branding or anything else, it wasn't my best thing, because I knew how to do systematic things. So I think that uh, if you have options to go to like computer technician school, if you have options, even if you're a front-end developer and want to learn design systems, I think it's a great way to do it that way. So to do have first a base of like front-end development and then going into design systems, I think it will be very helpful.
Mm. Yeah, it's way easier, I think, if you're a developer and coming to design system than the other way around. Because if people are really creative, then they can struggle a lot with this. I mean, well, it's a lot of systematic things. So, What's your favorite thing when you're not doing design systems? Are you coding all the afternoon?
No. I'm not coding a lot. I do code from time to time, but it's mostly for work or for my like personal stuff if I do something. But I would say I like electronic music a lot. I do some amateur DJing for friends, for myself, because I like to listen to music. I like to produce a little bit of music, but it's just like for myself, nothing more. And then it's Legos, which is completely in line with design systems and cooking. I like to cook a lot. I basically almost every day I cook my own meal if I have time. So I like to cook.
Oh, nice. That I don't hear often from guys. But yeah, it's a cool way, Legos. So what's your favorite? Do you have your favorite series of Lego, or is it just like having your own imagination and building stuff?
Yeah, I like to go by the, how do we say, instructions because it's easier. Because I'm not that creative, so I need instructions, but it's probably I like the Speed Champion series because I like cars too. I'm quite a car enthusiast, so I have quite a lot of these small cars laying around my apartment, and it's really good because they're such a small factor. They're not even that expensive, and there are a lot of details. So I give all the kudos to designers that they know how to put these pieces into a set that almost looks like a real car with the details. So there is the way that you can be very creative with design system because Legos are design system.
Yeah, I always wonder if they have like a set of components that they can actually produce, and then based on that components they have to build all this stuff. But I realized, because my son is also crazy about Legos, that they're actually producing quite a lot of new shapes. It's not just the ones that they had before, but now for some specific, especially some characters from Marvel, and they produce new stuff. But yeah, I'm always amazed, like, how is this possible?
Yeah, I'm more amazed when they use the like regular blocks to build something because I think in this series that I like, the Speed Champions, it's they use mostly like common blocks. It's not like custom made blocks, and it's even more impressive to like put in the shapes on these small like 9 blocks width of the car, and it's yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, really cool. So, in terms of cooking, what's your favorite dish?
It would probably be chicken curry because I can cook it for a few days. So I have it for 2 or 3 days and it gets better with time. But for like friends or like hangouts, I think some steak is always a good party starter.
Nice. Cool. Now we can end this cool conversation with Tasty. So,
Kind of salt.
yeah, where can people find you if they will have some questions? What's your best approach?
Yeah, I think I'm the most active or approachable on LinkedIn. Of course, you can even check our Better Care site. We have quite a lot of blogs on the design system part. As I mentioned before, the design to code part, we have a whole blog written. I think we have written blog about the tokens. We have written blogs about how our BDS started, how our clinical visualization part of the design system started. So we have a lot of blogs about design systems. So I think they're quite a good read. So I would say my LinkedIn and Better's, so companies LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks for sharing so many helpful resources and also writing so many resourceful blogs. I think it's very helpful for anyone, and especially really cool insight into healthcare industry. And Valentin, thank you for your time and all the insights. I think it was very, very detailed and helpful for anyone.
Thank you.